Alrighty, here's chapter 7 of The Day the School Blew Up. And you can look out right there while I read. As a rule, I am morally opposed to getting up early in the morning. However, despite desperate times call for desperate measures. So I'm up at 7:30 a.m. That's 30 minutes earlier than I usually get up and 15 minutes before anyone else in my lazy family gets out of bed. So I have plenty of time to put the frosting on my peace offering. Or so I thought. Mom and I started on it last night after Dad and Mary went to bed so they wouldn't eat any. Say what you will about Mom's healthful food night, but the woman hasn't forgotten the value of pastries. The problem was that by the time I came up with the idea of baking a cake, we didn't have time to frost it. Mom told me I could do it this morning and left out the recipe for me. But when the morning came, I couldn't find the stinking cocoa powder anywhere. Not in the pantry, not in the fridge, or not even in the freezer. I didn't have much time to search. The bus would arrive in 20 minutes and I was still in my pajamas. I've heard of only one guy ever trying to go to school in his pajamas. And let's just say he's still going to counseling for what they did to him on the bus. The only other place the cocoa powder could be was in the garage, on one of Mom's numerous bulk food shelves. Although why it would be there was beyond me. The items on those shelves were better suited for Dr. Frankenstein's laboratory than for making desserts for discerning fifth graders. The garage smelled like gasoline and old clothes, and my personal opinion was that any food in this environment wasn't fit for human consumption. Nevertheless, I opened the door and made my way to Mom's surplus of food items. There were big jars of red, yellow, and brown spices. Next to them were containers of herbs and beans, followed by an assortment of canned goods, the contents of which I have no clue whatsoever. Right next to the mystery cans, however, was a small box of a fine chocolate-colored powder. Bingo! Snatching the box and dashing to the kitchen, I began making the icing for the cake. It only took 10 minutes or so, and I wondered whether I had broken some world record for frosting production. Grabbing the cake out of the fridge, I began to smear the rich, chocolatey goodness all over it. But I was running late out of time. It was only 15 minutes until the bus arrived, and my parents couldn't afford to pay for counseling. "What are you doing, Peter Paul?" It was Mary, and she was dressed and tying her hair in a ponytail. I thrust the bowl of frosting into her hands, along with the spatula. "Make yourself useful." When I returned, ready for school, Mary was gently placing aluminum foil over the freshly frosted cake. I was pleasantly surprised. Amazed would be more accurate. "Thanks," I said, picking up the pen. "My pleasure," she said, smiling. Something wasn't right. Our interactions are never this friendly. But there was no time for an investigation. We had a bus to catch, and I had my class's confidence to win back. And as long as I could keep the vultures on the bus away from the cake, the day should be full of sweet success. The morning passed apologizingly slow. No one said a word to me except for when Miss Witherspoon called my name as she was handing back our most recent spelling test. I failed. Apparently, acceptable doesn't have an X in it after all, nor do a number of other words that sound like they should. 5 minutes before the lunch bell rang, I walked up to the teacher's desk and told Miss Witherspoon I had brought a special treat for the class. "What is it, Peter?" she asked suspiciously. "A chocolate cake," I whispered. My answer seemed to relieve her fears. She dismissed me to fetch it from its hiding place in the cafeteria's kitchen. Upon my return to the classroom, I set the pan on her desk, and she led me to the front of the classroom where she made the announcement. "Class, can I have your attention, please?" "What's he done now?" grumbled Lucas. "Yeah," said Lacey. "What mistake has he made now besides wearing those pants and that shirt?" "Now that's enough, class. Peter hasn't done anything wrong. As a matter of fact, You will be pleased to know that he has brought us a special treat today, a chocolate cake. There was a moment of stunned silence, then an outcry of jubilation. Chocolate! Cried Sam, and once again took to his sugar-inspired dancing atop his desk. And once again, it took Miss Witherspoon 5 minutes to calm him down. I know one boy who's getting a very small piece, she muttered to herself as she finished with Sam and dismissed the class to wash for lunch. It didn't take long for the kids to gulp down their lunches and clear their desks in anticipation of the chocolate masterpiece I had brought. I had to admit, as I unveiled it from the aluminum foil, that Mary had done a good job. The edge of the cake, no edge of the cake was left uncovered by the rich, creamy-looking frosting. Miss Witherspoon cut the cake into equal pieces. I delivered a piece to each student in the room. Finally, I sat down with my piece and Miss Witherspoon with hers. My redemption was at hand. All right, class, what do we say to Peter? True to form, the class responded in a monotone, but not ungracious, "Thank you, Peter Pappenfuss." Satisfied, Miss Witherspoon gave the green light to begin cramming the cake into our mouths. I waited for a moment. At the sound of 12 plastic forks clacked against the 12 plastic plates as each student picked up a utensil and thrust it into the moist dessert, carving out a gooey piece and placing it in their gutlets. Any moment, the sound of satisfaction would saturate my ear, and I, Peter Paul Pappenfuss, would be a hero. "Ugh!" shrieked Naomi. She was getting louder. I immediately turned around to see what was going on. Had she swallowed her fork or something? Just then, Melissa shouted, what? Her mouth was wide open and full of cake. It was not a pretty sight. I felt panic swelling in my chest. It couldn't be the cake. Could it? The boys cried out next. It's, stuttered Big Calvin, too horrified to finish his sentence. Sam Feltzer came to the rescue. It's not chocolate! It's not chocolate! He yelled, standing to his feet and letting the cake fall out of his mouth onto his plate in revolting, glubrous lumps. Then he started scraping his tongue with his hands. It's not chocolate. Chandra, who hadn't yet tasted her cake, and who was compelled by her compulsion to clean, grabbed the water bottle off the dry erase board and to spray the remaining cake off Sam's tongue. But she missed and sprayed it in his eyes. "I'm blind!" he shouted, forgetting about the cake in his mouth and the cake on his desk, which he knocked on the floor. The rest of the class made a mad dash to the drinking fountain, with Miss Witherspoon close behind to try to subdue the mob. They were elbowing each other and crying, "He's poisoned the frosting!" I felt in a daze. I couldn't believe this was happening. I looked at my piece of cake and gingerly put a little bit of frosting on my finger and tasted it. I spit it out immediately, but the bitterness still clung to my taste buds. "What is it?" I said to myself. Unfortunately, Lucas Snodgrass heard me on his way back from the drinking fountain and sauntered up to my desk. "It's unsweetened carob, Pappenfuss. My mom keeps some of that stuff in her pantry as well. I really thought it was cocoa, Lucas. You gotta believe me," he laughed. "Sure, Peter, I believe you." "You do?" "Of course I do. You are the most well-behaved student in school, except for your weekly trips to the principal's office, setting people on fire in science lab, making everyone miss recess, and of course your exceptional grade point average. What was it last year? -4.0? My blood was boiling and I felt a strong urge to punch Lucas in the gut. "Face it, Pappenfuss, you'd get into trouble even if you were trying to be good. You're hopeless. The next time, if you are going to mess up everyone's day, at least try to leave our lunch break alone." I cocked my fist, ready to swing, but my rage was giving way to another emotion. one that made my eyes wet and burning. Shoving Lucas aside, I made my way out the door and ran. I kept running as Miss Witherspoon called out to me, "Peter! Peter, come back here! I want to talk to you!" I didn't know where I was going, but I knew she wouldn't dare leave the unlucky 13 unattended. I managed to slip past a line of 7th graders on their way back from gym class, which was good news because that meant the gym was empty, and there is a great place to hide under the stage area where all the gymnastics equipment is stored. I crawled back past sweaty, smelling mats and pads into the darkest corner I could find. It only took 5 minutes before I heard voices looking for me. One of them belonged to Principal Purvis. "Peter, are you in here? Please come out. I'd like to talk to you about what happened." Yeah, right. There was no way I was going to talk to him. I could sense the anger in his voice. He called a few more times, then left. I waited for 2 more minutes, then let the tears fall. They rolled down my cheeks, burning all the way down. I curled up and hugged my knees to my chest. I felt so stupid. Stupid for having tried to do something, to be something I'm not. Stupid for having failed at even a simple deed. Stupid for having run out of class to cry like a baby. And where was God? After all, none of this mess would have happened if I hadn't been trying to be a good Christian and help my dad. He has enough troublemakers in the congregation without having his son being one. God, why didn't you help me? I mean, aren't you supposed to help people do good? I spent the rest of the school day under the stage, telling God how mad I was. And when I finally sneaked out and found Mom waiting for me out front in the car with my sister, I told God I had had enough. I was through trying to do good. It wasn't worth it. "Peter, where have you been?" Mom demanded as I got in the car. "Everyone has been worried, looking for you." I shrugged and remained silent, feeling the tears threatening to come back. "Peter, I spoke with Miss Witherspoon already, and she gave me your things. I'm so sorry you had a bad day, but you can't just run off like this, honey. Now sit tight, and I'll be back. I have to let your teachers know that we found you." I lay my head back against the car seat and looked in the rearview mirror. I saw Mary sitting right behind me, coloring with a smile on her face. My rage returned. "Thanks for your help this morning, Mary," I said coolly. "No problem, Peter. How did everyone like the cake you made them?" I swallowed hard. "Oh, fine. They thought it was a scream." Mary fought to keep her smile from turning into a grin. My hand slowly drifted to the lever attached to the underside of my seat. "You know, I learned something today, Mary." "What is that, Peter?" "That it never works out trying to be something you're not." Her coloring slowed down just a little. "What do you mean?" "Well, it's like the picture you're coloring. You put some time into it. I see. It looks nice." She looked up, mildly concerned. "Thanks." "Don't mention it. But as I was saying, it's like you work so hard to paint a beautiful picture of something," my fingers wrapped tightly around the seat lever, "only to have it ruined by forces you can't possibly control or see coming." She rested the point of her red crayon on the nose of the clown she was coloring and looked alarmed. "Peter, what are you doing?" I sighed. "I don't know, just talking. I had a long day. Never mind me." Just then, Mom reappeared at the school entrance and was making her way to the car. Mary started coloring again. For a moment, I waited, watching Mary carefully fill in the clown's nose with bright red crayon. Then I pulled the seat lever, sending the chair flying back into her lap. It felt good to be me again.